But I think that my deal actually is attainable. I think my deal is attainable, and my deal would actually mean peace. And I want that peace. I'm not looking to, it's, again, I'm upset and annoyed that anybody would suggest that I'm looking for a war with Iran. All right, we've sort of lapsed into audience participation here inadvertently. So why don't I, before I get into what I actually wanted to talk about tonight, why don't I take some questions? Any questions? Okay, I knew this was going to happen.
There's an article in the Huffington Post that implied that you do not support Obama's peace initiative with Iran, and then this guy Robert Naiman wrote an article saying Alan Grayson wants war with Iran.
Well, that's pretty silly, isn't it? Okay, I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That's a legitimate question. And this is what I really, really think. Now, but before I get to that, I will tell you, I thought it was a cheap shot for him to say that somehow I was trying to placate AIPAC, of all things. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I remember being the only member of Congress actually willing to go up against AIPAC and speak against war with Syria, and that was only 2 years ago. My God, can't we even remember back 24 months any longer? Okay, and Naiman actually said, this is the guy who actually went toe-to-toe, and AIPAC went in everyone's office, and I felt that was a very important turning point. I did not want to have another unnecessary war in the Middle East, and I felt the problem had other solutions. And I was right. And I was right. And if, in fact, we'd gone ahead and attacked Syria the way that the administration wanted to do, what would have happened? We would have destroyed the command and control over the gas, over the chemical weapons, and who would have gotten them once the command and control was obliterated? Who would? Who said that? Who said that? Terrorists. ISIS. Yes, right. So instead of all those beheadings that we see on our computer screens and on our TVs right now, instead we'd be seeing gas slowly moving over the landscape, poison gas all over the Middle East, if in fact the administration had gone ahead and done what they wanted to do. So I don't think I need to have my bona fides questioned by Mr. Naiman on the subject of war and peace. But I will tell you my honest opinion about the Iranian negotiations. I think they're about the wrong thing. And this is my fundamental problem. The administration has only one card to play, and that card is sanctions. Nobody plausibly believes that President Obama is going to launch a military attack against Iran. Nobody thinks that that's going to happen. I mean, he plays games about it linguistically by saying, well, everything's on the table. You know, it must be a very crowded table. But the fact is that people on the inside, nobody believes that the president is going to actually use military force against Iran. So what is left? The only thing that's left is exactly what we've been doing, which is sanctions. Okay, now, so we have one card, and they have several cards. One card that they have is their nuclear program. That's an important card. Another card that they have is their program to create intercontinental ballistic missiles, which actually could land in the United States. Has anybody heard up to this point, before this evening, that Iran had an ICBM program? Raise your hand. Okay, one person heard of that. Well, apparently the president hadn't heard of it.
Wow.
So we have been negotiating with the Iranians about one thing, but not another thing. Now, another thing is that Iran, and I don't think there's really any debate about this at this point, Iran is supplying missiles, not nuclear missiles, but missiles, to non-state groups throughout the Middle East. Notably Hezbollah and Hamas, but not only Hezbollah and Hamas. There is a serious debate going on right now about whether they're providing missiles and other military weapons to groups in Yemen, in Libya, and even in Egypt. So why are we not negotiating about that? How hard? Yes, we do. But if we're going to have a negotiation about one thing, we should have a negotiation about everything. Now, once you drop the sanctions, okay, okay. Now let me continue. Let me continue, because after all, I've got the chair. I mean, and I've got the microphone, so you have to let me continue. My sense of the appropriate way to do this is that we have a negotiation not only about the nuclear program, and by the way, if we're going to have a negotiation of the nuclear program, that means no nuclear material, that means no centrifuges, that means a serious deal, not a half-assed deal. All right? Wow. We should have a negotiation about the nuclear program, and we should have a negotiation about the ICBM program, and we should have a negotiation also about providing missiles to non-state groups. This is the first time in history that non-state groups have ever been able to launch missiles, even 100 missiles, and in fact it's tens of thousands. So if we want to have peace, it ought to be a complete and thorough peace. And we have only this one bit of leverage, this one lever, it's sanctions. Once you remove the sanctions, if we remove the sanctions today and we reinstituted them 6 months from now, it would be 2 or 3 years before they had any real effect. The sanctions have been in place for years already. It takes years before they actually have any bite. So I would be in favor of an agreement that covered their entire nuclear program, their ICBM program, and they're providing missiles to other groups outside their country. If I saw such a deal, I would support such a deal. That's not where we are right now. That's why I'm not happy with the negotiations.
What we're saying in this is saying, we get it, you're suffering, we're gonna throw that card away and offer some friendship. Let's talk about the rest of the stuff. Your entire region of the world is blowing up, and we want to help do something about that. I believe we have to trust, and they're not going to talk about all that other stuff, Alan.
They have to.
Not as long
But
as
Alan,
the
we have no
sanctions have
proof
bite
that they've done
and make the people suffer. There's something.
But Alan also,
I'm saying yes,
Yeah.
we will give up on the sanctions, but only in return for a complete deal.
But-
I'm not saying no
Why-
deal. I'm
but
saying
Alan-
bomb Iran.
Why do they
It's
have to give us
ridiculous
anything?
for anybody
They're
to
not
say,
ready to
let's
trust
go
us
ahead and
yet.
bomb Iran. It wouldn't even work.
But Alan, the ex-CIA guy, Ray McGovern, for instance, who's a friend of mine, they don't have a bomb. They never had anything. They wanted it for medical reasons.
No, I totally disagree. And between the two of us, I'm the only one here who gets classified briefings.
Okay,
I completely disagree with the idea that they never wanted to have a nuclear weapon.
They did.
They've spent billions of dollars. They've had thousands of
But-
scientists working on this
Alan,
for a
Alan,
decade.
Alan,
There's no doubt in my mind, absolutely doubt in my mind, that they have a nuclear program, and the purpose of the nuclear program is to create not just one nuclear weapon, but multiple nuclear weapons. Go ahead.
Are trying to develop a nuclear weapon. Okay, they've got U.S. troops on both sides. They've been called axis of evil. Our government has overthrown them before. You know, someone was assassinating their nuclear scientists. You know, the Stuxnet thing was directed at them. Why wouldn't they, you know, why don't you start negotiating with all the countries in the region, including starting with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and let's start
Okay,
trying to resolve their differences?
listen, clearly, if you listen to what the Iranians are saying, they're very concerned about the fact that there are U.S. forces in Afghanistan, in the northeast. At one time, 150,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, enough to do some serious damage to Iraq. And in Iraq, as much as 120,000 at one point, U.S. soldiers in Iraq on their western border, including a border which had been the subject of a war within memory. 20 years ago, Iran and Iraq were actually at war with each other. So clearly, it's understandable why Iran would want to have a nuclear weapon. I understand their motivation. I understand sort of where they're coming from. But that's not the same as saying that it's releasing us from our choice about whether to do anything about it. Now, we've used non-military means. Sanctions are only economic means. We've used non-military means in order to try to discourage them from having a nuclear weapon. That's our right, okay? We have a right to decide, and we have a right to decide what we buy and what we sell with them. We have a better world if Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. And we're entitled to that opinion. So in the same way that they want what they want, we also can want what we want. And what we want, for the most part, is fewer nuclear weapons in the world, including those that might be developed by Iran. Peace is certainly better than war. They want to have the sanctions lifted, and in return, they're willing to basically put their program on hold. I think they should eliminate their program. I don't think they should just put it on hold. I think they should eliminate it. But their motivation is very simple. Their motivation is they want the sanctions lifted, period. And they're willing to give up something in return. I think they should give up more. I think they should give up something that we know as peace. That's what we should see in return. Peace. We're gonna.
Netanyahu's position, do you?
No, I don't support Netanyahu's position in the sense that I don't think that the whole thing should turn on whether Iran. Netanyahu's position is the whole thing should. Netanyahu has several positions, but one position is that the whole thing should turn on whether or not Iran, quote, recognizes Israel. I don't believe that should be the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter should be, are we creating peace? Are we actually creating a situation where there's an end to tension, an end to conflict, an end to war? Are we actually laying the foundation for normal relations between all of those Iranians who want a decent life and the 230 million Americans who are in a position to do something good for them in their own lives? That's what I'm hoping for.
You have to look at these people want to have peace. They want to send their kids to college. They want to have a decent economy without their money losing half of its value over the last 2 or 3 years.
I know.
I mean, come on. That country has not attacked anybody. Our country has attacked. Since World War II, we've attacked 50 countries, and we're going to talk about them being a threat to the world.
Okay, all right. I could probably recite for you those 50 countries. I am well aware of what you're talking about. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact of what I said. I do think that the Iranian government, not the people, but the government has adopted a great deal of hostility toward other countries. The leader of the country said just a few days ago, we now control 4 Arab capitals. That's not really a good thing to say about your neighbors. We have to get past this idea that just because somebody's doing something that we're not in favor of, or maybe they're insulting us, we're going to go ahead and invade another country. That's crazy talk, and that's the way it's been ever since the Republicans took over, with Obama only lightly tamping it down. And now we are starting to see a change. I think Syria represented a change. Yeah. We were able to get the chemical weapons out of Syria without their falling into the hands of other crazies, and now it's done. It's mission accomplished without using force and violence and without killing innocent people. Right. Okay, that's a template that we can apply elsewhere. And in fact, if this were what I would regard as a comprehensive, thorough solution, it would be much the same. It would revive people's respect for each other. It revives the sense that not every answer is the answer of war. As Nancy Pelosi says, and she's very true about this, there's a lot of people who think that if you just have one more war, you won't have any war anymore, and it's never that way. It's always one after another. So you're right. You are absolutely right. There needs to be a different way of solving problems that doesn't involve killing.
You've had and you have briefings that the rest of us don't. Why did you decide to part company with your own party, with your own leadership, with your own president, your own Secretary of State? Why do you, Alan Grayson, think that you know something that they, after years of deliberation, don't know? What do you know that nobody else knows?
You make it sound so plausible. Okay, let me have my turn. Okay, first of all, there are many, many, many Democrats who feel exactly the way that I do. How do I know that? Because I'm in the same room with them for about 2 or 3 hours every day.
Sure.
I know, we talk about this all the time. Yeah. Okay? So it's really not true. It's not true to say that I'm somehow out on a limb here. Okay? There are many liberal Democrats who feel exactly the way that I do. There are both Jewish Democrats and non-Jewish Democrats who feel exactly the way that I do. There are J Street supporters and there are AIPAC supporters who feel exactly the way that I do. Okay? The fact is that in any situation like this, there's bound to be some people who say this is a good deal and other people who say it's a bad deal. That's the way it goes. I'm not condemning people for saying it's a good deal. I'm not questioning. No, you can make a good case here that Kerry is on an enormous ego trip. Okay? And he thinks he's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's going to be his legacy, and Obama's totally detached and blah, blah. I'm not going there, okay? I'm not questioning Kerry's motives here. I'm saying, I look at this deal, the deal is incomplete. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Now, you're telling me you think I have some hypothetical problem in the district, which I don't have. Okay? And you're saying, for goodness sake,
why are you not with them?
What makes you think that the leadership is uniform on this subject?
Because we know exactly what's going to happen when it comes to a vote. Isn't your position? Maybe you should.
I mean, for goodness sake, there are now 68 senators who want to shut down the entire negotiations, and half of them are Democrats. Okay, I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them. Not only because I'm not in the Senate yet, but I mean, for God's sake, most people who are elected officials in Washington D.C. think that the president is wrong on this, and that includes most Democrats. That's where we are at this point. That's why the president. Okay, look, I'm just. Like I said, I talk to these people every day. You may speak to J Street on a frequent basis. I talk to them. No, what do you mean becoming part of them? I never said the president should stop negotiating. There are 68 votes in the Senate today that the president should stop negotiating. Okay, I'm not one of those.
I'm sorry, but you didn't state it that way. You're saying that they think like you, so that you all think the same way. You didn't say that stop negotiating. What I'm saying, Alan, is that we have to begin somewhere, and the sanctioning is vile. It hurts.
That I totally disagree with that, and maybe Mimi can weigh in on this. I don't believe sanctions are vile at all. Okay, this is an alternative way of expressing what you feel that's important to you that doesn't involve killing people. There are no drones involved, there are no missiles involved, there's no death involved. Economic sanctions are, in fact, a legitimate use of one's national decision making.
Madeleine Albright said 500,000 children died in Iraq because of the sanctions, and she said to Amy Goodman, I think the price
Which
was
sanctions
worth
are we
it.
talking about?
The Iraq sanctions done to Saddam Hussein in an attempt to regime change in Iraq before we had the big war. So what happened, I look at a fairly modern country, Iran, and I think about them going through a depression like America went through in the 30s because they're not participating in the global economy, regardless of what I think of that global economy. But they are going from a European-style Middle Eastern nation, and they're kind of sinking. So, of course, as Obama observed here, people who are desperate go for, against God, guns, and gays, whatever he said, that got him into trouble. The same theocratic thing goes on, and in this particular moment, there's a moment of trust between the people going, we think you don't want to be a radical theocracy, and we don't want you to have a nuclear weapon. So can we begin to talk like we're agreeing on that? Yeah. And the people are going, yes, let's do that. And John Kerry, ego tripper no, said, I'd like to be the man who does this. And evidently he did it, and it was difficult, but there's some good faith there. Yeah. We as American progressives, I guess, here in California think, good. And then we see our Congress, Senate, and House devolving into this. We're not going to have any agreement because it's not enough, and we're going to still punish the people.
Just like the
it's exactly where we shouldn't go. It's a moment of hope being crushed, and I understand what you're saying, Ellen, because the agreement you want is probably right. But if you were talking to a friend or a relative, if you just got one of your 10 and go, see you next Thanksgiving, maybe we'll agree on 4 of them next year. That's the process we're in. It's a process, and I just see being shut down.
Okay, look, Mimi, I respect your opinion. I respect you, but I have a different perspective. Okay, as I said before, we only have one shot at this. If we're not going to be able to go back next year and say, because once the sanctions are lifted, we lose all of our leverage with the regime. That's it. Okay, so what means that they keep their nuclear material, they keep their centrifuges, they keep their ICBM program, and they keep providing missiles to Hezbollah and to Hamas and 3 or 4 other groups.
Well, I suppose comes into this too.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think that my deal actually is attainable. I think my deal is attainable, and my deal would actually mean peace. Okay, that's and I want that peace. I'm not looking to, I'm upset and annoyed that anybody would suggest that I'm looking for a war with Iran. All right, that's not the point. What I'm looking for is not something that's like kind of peace, but kind of not peace, kind of war, but kind of not war. I want the real thing. Okay? And the real thing is we work out our differences, the sanctions get lifted, and the Iranians get to join the modern world. Something that they very much deserve.
You got to give them something before they're going to be that.
I mean, no one talks like that, and it's unattainable, and it's silly. You have to want something realistic and an attainable goal. People over there.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
point is that
Okay, you're right about that, Cindy. That like we do have this weird kink in our psychology where we must vilify our opponents, and it's true in international affairs. It's true in politics. It's kind of an unpleasant, an unfortunate thing. There, we saw it with Syria. When there was a chemical weapons attack, which by the way, the German head of intelligence says was not ordered by Assad,
Right.
was not ordered by Assad. When we had that, we had Kerry saying over and over again, the dictator Assad is as bad as Hitler, blah, 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 blah. So you're right, there is this unfortunate thing where we sort of talk ourselves into things that we shouldn't do because we end up vilifying people, and in the course of vilifying people, end up vilifying entire nations. That's unfortunate. The Iranians have a magnificent civilization. It goes back it goes back 3,500 years at least, and maybe beyond that. They have accomplished amazing things, and it's fair to say that when the Iranians who had a system of laws and were living in cities and had developed agriculture, my ancestors were living in caves and staying warm by brushing sticks together. I concede that point. But okay, let me try to summarize where we are right now, and then I'm going to go on to what I really wanted to talk about tonight. So this is where. First of all, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. You made some really good points. You have moved my thinking on this subject. I remain concerned about the things I said, but in fact, in the end, it is true that some deal is better than no deal, and I can say that. I would be horrified as much as anybody here if a failure of this deal meant that we went to war once again, or for that matter, if anybody else went to war once again. There's the Israelis have been rattling their saber over this now for many, many, many years, and I think that would be unfortunate too if it came to that. So I think that there's an old saying. It's not limited to politics. You shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right.